Hello, my name is Walangari Karntawarra and I'm a member of the Arrernte and Luritja nations of Central Australia. I wish to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the Eora nation and to all the elders on the land which you are on.
Can you tell me who is Walangari?
Walangari is an Aboriginal man from Central Australia. The name Walangari comes from my grandfather, my father's father, and it's a Luritja name from Central Australia, and its meaning is patience or to wait. So it's sort of like a virtue, I guess. Well, I've had a very, very interesting childhood. I was born in Alice Springs, and my family worked on a number of cattle stations, one being Hamilton Downs, the other two being Milton Park and Amberla stations, which are just northwest of Alice Springs, going out to Papanya, Yundamu, out that way. And they were the closest, they were pretty much close to Alice Springs, so within about an hour's drive, we're pretty much on those properties. We worked as cattlemen, so even when I was a young boy, we would work up to 16 hours a day. Obviously, in those days, we didn't get paid. We did get a ration at Christmas, which was, even for children, was astonishing because we'd get, I think it was $200 cash, plus a pair of boots, a hat, a shirt, trousers and belt, so the stockman outfit. And then we get 10 tins of tobacco. So even though we were kids, they were supplying us with tobacco, and we'd roll our own. So we used to watch Trinity movies at the walk-in and go back to work and ride horses just like them, smoking cigarettes with the horse on top. So yeah, we'd emulate these Hollywood stars on riding around horses.
Who was your inspiration early in your life?
There were a number of, I guess, because probably the closest person to me when I was a young boy was my grandfather, and all my uncles, because I grew up surrounded all my family, and even though I lived in Alice Springs, I also lived on this cattle station, and I always loved going back to the station because you'd always get out there and ride horses and all that sort of stuff, and it was a lot of fun. And also, you could explore the land and go bush hunting, go hunting and looking for bush tucker and all sorts of stuff. So my grandfather was a very important person, and of course my other uncles, they're very, very influential on me. But because I was the oldest in my family, no, I wasn't influenced by my siblings or my cousins because I'm the oldest. So first great-grandchild, eldest brother, eldest sibling. So all my people I grew up with were my young uncles and aunties. So we still call each other like brother and sister, but really they're my uncles. But then once I started hearing about other people, like my great grandfather Anmatjerre, then I'd have these things where I could see that people had achieved certain things, But once again, it never dawned on me that I'd be an artist, because I always wanted to be a carpenter, so I'd build houses, and which I did 3 years as a carpenter. Yeah, it's varied. One of my uncles, he was a fantastic artist, brilliant artist, brilliant musician. He was a bass player in one of the most famous Aboriginal bands in Australia, and I'd sit down and watch him, and I was just blown away by his technique, and you could almost feel like you could walk into his paintings, and I was fascinated. So that's probably, he was one of my big influences, but because he died young, I couldn't carry on that influence, and it was a very, very tragic way in which he died, so, to the point where my family never told me about him, because they knew it would affect me, and, so a lot of times when some of my family don't tell me, because, if they tell other mobs, some people will get up and say, oh, well, they'll pack up and leave and go back home, and they didn't want that to happen to me, so they were deliberately not sort of like telling me that people had passed away, and then I'd find out years later, so yeah.
And what was your first artistic experience?
It probably occurred when I was at high school, and we went out to a place called Ross River, which is sort of like southeast of Alice, on the McDonnell Ranges again. I think I was high school then, 13, 14, and part of the excursion was to have these various different competitions that they had. So one was unbelievable these days, because in those days you could take a gun with real bullets to school and shoot them, and so the teachers brought their gun, and we would have target shots across the creek and putting up bottles and whatever. So we had a target shooting competition with real guns, real bullets, and then we had an orienteering competition, and then at the end of it we had an art competition. So it was a three-day event. Yeah, 3 days. So the first one was a shooting competition, and because I grew up on a cattle station shooting guns, I won that one. So I was a very good shot, even at 12, and because we used to go hunting for kangaroos. And long distance, like 200 metres, easy. And then they had the orienteering course, and I won that. And because I was very good at orienteering where I went to school, and teachers like at a college called St. Philip's College in Alice Springs, where I went to boarding college. So they used to have all those events all the time. And the last was an art competition on the last day. So what happened was you had 2 hours to create a piece of art. So everybody went off, and some did paintings, and I remember one of my cousins, he cooked a fish and, put it beautifully, and so it looked artistic as what a chef would do. And other people did stuff, and I thought, oh, this is pretty amazing. So anyway, we had 2 hours to do, and an hour and a half, half an hour had passed, and I'm standing there, and the teacher goes, Colin, what are you going to make? What are you going to do? I said, oh, I don't know. So 1 hour passed, and they said, Colin, what are you going to do? I don't know. I haven't decided. An hour and a half passed. So what are you going to do? I don't know. So they said, you only got half an hour left. So 15 minutes passed. They said, you got 15 minutes left to produce something. Everybody's nearly finished theirs. 10 minutes passed, I had 5 minutes left. They said, what are you going to do? You got 5 minutes left to produce a piece of art. 3 minutes passed, I had 2 minutes left. A minute went past, I had 1 minute left. And teachers were standing there. They said, we're going to announce the winner soon. What are you going to do? So I looked around, and right next to me was a huge big gum tree, and because we were in the riverbed, and this gum tree, the bark had fallen off, but the bark was almost an inch thick, and it twisted and contorted and there were 3 pieces that were right at my feet. So I just grabbed 2 pieces, stuck them in the ground, and got the other piece, and I balanced it on top. And I had 5 seconds, and I won. And the teacher said, "Oh my God, it's modern art."
Who encouraged you to become a teacher?
So when I went to school, I had this vision of becoming a carpenter. So, but I was also very good at athletics. So, and I could have gone on and become an Olympic athlete, because I actually did the time trials with Herb Elliott, and he was my coach, Percy Shirley. So the very 2 famous people. But as a young fella, 15, there was still the world, to explore and do things, and so I could have gone anywhere. And but once again, I was studying as a carpenter. I was working for Telecom in those days, and I did quite well. I mean, I was in the top 500 apprentices in South Australia at the time, so got a little bit of a leverage and support as well. But then my grandfather passed away. Because I was so close to him, that really stifled a lot of my movement forward. And when I went to Alice Springs, I pretty much gave up my apprenticeship. But then I had an opportunity to get employed. So I got employed, and I managed to re-establish my apprenticeship with this building company. And so we built a few buildings, and they still stand. So some of the things that I built are still there, which is like I built that, and then one of my aunties said to me, "Why don't you go to Adelaide, go to school?" And she said, "Well, all your other cousins and your friends are down there, so why don't you go?" So I said, "Oh, okay." So I made the transition and left Alice Springs and went down to Adelaide. And because they all stayed at a hostel called Nindi Hostel, and there were I think there were 3 different schools that we'd all attend, but we all stayed in the same little hostel, and a lot of it were all cousins and uncles, and a lot of them were my young uncles as well, and aunties, so then I thought, well, I can't not have a job. And I did a bit of stock work again, so cattle contract mustering, and where they'd use helicopters and motorbikes and so forth, but it turned out to be very dangerous work, because you'd have to be standing there with a possibility of a huge big bull with horns out to here, charging down at you, and I'm only like 15, not like 18, years old, 17 years old, come out of school and see, so it was terrifying to see these big animals. I think I lasted 2 days. That was enough for me. I said, it's too hard. I said, this is so, and they weren't paying well, and so anyway, a whole lot of things occurred there, and to the point where I went back to Alice, and I had a run-in with that cattleman, and where I ended up having to take him to the police. So I've charged them with assault against me, and at the same time I also applied to go to Teachers College. So I had 2 things that were happening at the same time. So one was the pending court case, and the other one was waiting for my application to arrive. As I'm waiting for the court case to come up against this fellow who assaulted me, on the same day almost that the court case was happening, my application to Teachers College arrived, and I was accepted. So I dropped the court case and went to Teachers College instead, and my life changed forever. Yeah, and that was a turning point, pretty much, for me.
Can you tell me about the journey that you went on with your art? How did it develop?
I started painting when I was 20, about 23, 24. Yeah. During that time, I had won the Battle of the Bands competition in Darwin. It was a national competition, so 900 bands around Australia. So I won the Northern Territory heat, and when that happened, I left my teaching job, so I was no longer teaching. So we had a tour, so we came to Sydney, and when we came to Sydney, we entered the finals, and I came second around Australia, but there were certain things that were supposed to happen, and they didn't. So they didn't. The people organised didn't carry through their contractual agreements. So whether because we were Aboriginal band and we're the first ones to really win a big competition, and so when we came to Sydney, as a lot of bands are, you're broke. So we're trying to find some money to eat, have something to eat. So I decided to do a painting. So I did my first painting here in Sydney, a little one about this big. And then I said to my girlfriend, we'll go around and try and sell it so we can get some money to get some food for dinner. So anyway, off we went, walking around from gallery to gallery trying to sell it, and I couldn't sell it for $20. My first painting. So anyway, I gave it to my friend because I was staying with this lady in her house, the old man. So I said, well, I'll give you this painting. So you never know, I might be famous one day and it'll be worth a lot of money. So she kept it, and so that was really the start. Then I left Sydney, went back to Alice Springs, and still had no money. So I started doing some paintings, and then and I was living with my mother-in-law then, and my girlfriend, my wife, and we were having a baby, and all of a sudden I started painting, and then and one night I did this painting, and where most of our families would do the ... So, but this night I splashed the painting, and I splashed it, and then my mother-in-law looked at it and said, "Oh, it looks beautiful," so that was the beginning of my abstract style. I didn't made a conscious decision to do that. It was just something. I'll try this, and all of a sudden, what just happened, and then it just eventuated, and then I moved. My girlfriend and my first wife got our own place when my baby was growing up, and I started painting, and then I did this one painting where I started doing these little dots and big dots, and in the big dots I did these swirls. So I did this painting, and I've got it here. So I've kept it. My mum sent it back to me. It nearly got destroyed in a fire. So one of my earliest pieces. So I kept. She saved it for me. And in the swirl, there was something that I didn't see. There was a spirit in this painting. So, and I had my baby in my arm, and every time I'd go to this painting, he would burst into laughter. And I couldn't understand why, but he was seeing something that and then there was one time where it was the first time my art was really, I suppose I was influenced. I saw it in a really public way. So where I'd done this beautiful big painting, and I had it on top of my double bed, and it looked like this rug, like a doona, and it was beautiful. And I thought, so anyway. The next day, I'd met this woman, American lady. She bought the painting, and I sold it for $600, which was cheap, really. It was worth a lot more than that, but I was just starting, so I didn't know the value of paintings. But I knew it was cheap anyway that I sold it to her. And what happened? She bought it, and then she said, "Oh, there's an auction that's coming up. Maybe you'd like to put some paintings in for an auction." I said, "Okay." So I did a couple of paintings, and I put these paintings in for auction. And it was the first time I had ever seen my paintings in auction. So I'm sitting there watching paintings being auctioned, and in half an hour that I was sitting there, I made probably about $2,000 while I'm sitting down having a scotch and coke. So I thought, this is a good way to earn a bit of cash. I quite like this. I thought, I think I'll explore this a little bit more. So I'm sitting down there, and all of a sudden, the woman that had bought my painting, this American lady, she bought this big painting off me before. She worked at Pine Gap, and so did this other man who ended up, they both were bidding against each other for this another painting of mine. And so this man won the bid. He got the painting, and so I got up off my chair, walked over, introduced myself to him, and he goes, "Oh, hi," in an American accent. He goes, I goes, "Oh, I'm the artist." He goes, "Oh, wow." He says, "Well, can I just tell you one thing? This is the most complicated mathematical equation I'd ever seen in my life." And I go, "Wow, really?" He goes, "Yeah." He said, "I should know because I'm a scientist and I send rockets into space." And I said, "Oh, that's really," he said, so that triggered, there was another trigger for me. And that triggered me then to take it on 100%, my art career. So that was a real turning point to say, okay, I've got to explore this because it's not just art now; it's mathematics and everything else, So so then I just explored, and then the more I explored it, the more I understood the universe, and I came into like looking at Mandelbrot sets, and being the equation for chaos. So that's how I began to paint. So I used chaos methods to paint to get us abstractions that I wanted, and it worked. Yeah, and I could paint many variations of the same thing, and all looked different. Not one looked the same. Yeah. So and that was it. Yeah.
What did teaching give to you?
Probably a sense of accomplishment. Gave me something that I could think of, that I could actually, I could still change things. I wanted to change things for the better for our people, and I thought, well, you can only do that better by building physical things, but teaching was very much a psychological thing. So you could change people by making them think differently. So I find that there's two parts. So it's like it's been through my art that's been a big influencer, because I don't actually teach art, so I just want to show them that there's a way of and creating avenues, and so people go, "Oh, well, if he can do that, I can do that." So I just try to say, well, here's a pathway, you can follow it. You can take it or leave it. And the other one is with education. So, part of being in education is having a longevity approach. So the longer you are in a job, the more influence you will have. So I've taught children here in Sydney for over 30 years in preschools, and those kids that I taught 30 years ago in preschool, they've got now children back at preschool, and I teach their kids. So I've actually gone through now one generation, and I'm on my second generation, and that's very important that you have that continuity of education and knowledge, and that gets passed through. And these aren't Aboriginal children that I'm teaching; these are non-Aboriginal kids. So I have a lot of white families who ring up preschools and say, "What have you done to our child? You've changed our family forever." And we go, "Why?" Well, and they'll say, "Well, all we hear is bush tucker this, bush tucker that, Aboriginal words, Aboriginal sayings. we see our child doing little Aboriginal dances and imitating animals, and and they always calling out Walangari, because they're my biggest fans, obviously. And I teach in many preschools around Sydney, and that's always been more of a joy in preschool rather than I mean I love teaching right across the board, because I teach from babies right through to government and and beyond, and the workforce. But the children give you something that the rest don't, and that's energy, freely. So you can go feeling tired and exhausted, and then you would leave a preschool and you come out with full of energy and happiness and that sort of thing. Yeah, so it's always a good feeling, and to see and to know that they're learning, whatever it is, But they're our future leaders, so and I want them to understand, the importance of keeping the story of Aboriginal people alive and the story of the Dreamtime, because that is the most powerful story in this whole universe.
What other forms of creative output do you have?
That was my, I guess, my painting and my drawing career, because being influenced by other artists like great grandfather Albert Anmatjerre, grandfather Clifford Possum, so these other famous artists in my family, all those legendary artists from the Central Australia, they're all famous artists now, and their paintings of theirs worth pretty much millions these days. But I've always been interested in music, dance. So when I was a young fella going to school in Adelaide, I created a dance class, and me and a friend of mine would go around and pick up Aboriginal kids from the streets and bring them in and teach them dance, and that pretty much started off dance schools in South Australia amongst Aboriginal people. But my musical career began also in Adelaide, because when I was going to school, a friend of mine lived in the same household, and he's one of the most famous Aboriginal musicians in Australia, and his name is Bart Willoughby, and Bart Willoughby has a number of bands, including No Fixed Address, which is in the Music Hall of Fame. But he and I lived together in a shed, because in the house there was a 3-bedroom house, and there were 18 people in the house, so we couldn't all fit in the house. So Bart and I moved into the shed when we were only young boys. So we came out of high school, and so we decked out the shed, and then one day I was reversing in my car, and all of a sudden I turned the radio on, and his song comes on. And it's a famous, well-known song, From My Eyes. In those days, his name of the song. He goes, "Oh, that's my song," and I couldn't believe it, because it's one of the first times I've ever heard an Aboriginal song on radio, and especially with the artist, my brother, right next to me, So I was totally blown away. But I've always had this urge to play music, and as a kid I was in the Salvation Army band, and I learned how to read and write music, and that was probably my first really foray into music, because it was part of the church program, and I enjoyed going. I used to play the tuba, so I said, "Well, this is the odd one out. I'll play this one rather than the trumpet. Everybody plays trumpet, saxophone, but I learned all that, and took up the tuba instead." And then when I left the Salvation Army, of course, I stopped my music, and then I came to Sydney. Didn't do anything. Had a couple of other bands in Sydney. One was called the Storm Raiders, and every time we played, a big storm would happen, lightning and thunder, and every gig. It was unbelievable, so it was always a fun thing, and I loved. But I'd always be creative. We'd also write our own original songs. We did a lot of covers. We'd played a lot of reggae music, a lot of stuff, a lot of country, a lot of blues. But I always had this urge to write my own stuff, and and that happened after, when my band Bush Doctor came to Sydney but the band split up after that. So I thought, oh well, I'll keep going. Continued on. Then I started writing songs, and after a while I left Alice, came to Sydney. When I came to Sydney, I had stopped playing music, but I was doing my art. Then I decided to go to music school here. So I went to music school, studied for a year, got my music certificate in music business as well. Formed a band, and that band is still going. It's still been operating for about 22 years. I still play, still write, still recording. I'm doing video clips for my last album, it's just been I've had fantastic musicians come through my band. Like it goes, it's always like a boom or bust. I'll get at one time I'll get maybe 5, 6, 7 really great musicians, and then they'll go off, and then I'll back down to the 3 core members, and then they'll go away, and then they'll do other, because they're on their own bands and they'll tour, but I'll stay home and I'll just keep writing songs, and then when we get back together, I'll introduce the songs to them, and then we'll record, and then we'll put on concerts, and so that's still happening. Yeah.
I hear you play the didgeridoo.
Yes, I do, and fortunately for me, that's been my saviour in a lot of ways, because I'm still able to perform as a musician, which is fantastic. I've almost got exclusivity, which is really good too, because there aren't very many didge players that are as good as I play, and that has resulted in me getting pretty much most of the work.
Can you tell me some of the big gigs that you've had recently that you have played in?
We're always doing the really big shows. We just the other day we did the cricket, so WBBL. We opened that every year now. We open the Sydney show every year. We've been doing that for 7 or 8 years. When Princess Anne came, we smoked her, and that was a bit of a funny affair, because protocols insist that you don't approach royalty directly. But we did, and we smoked her, and she didn't care. She just loved it, and no one else bothered, so they weren't worried. We do the Spring Festival at Willoughby. So at Willoughby, that's my longest gig, I guess, because I've been doing the citizenship ceremonies there for 22 years. So, I've made thousands and thousands of people citizens there, and they love us over there. So, and it's good to have that. Once again, a bit of a, long-term association with a council or whatever, and we have a really good relationship with a lot of the councils here in Sydney, and I'm on the RAP committee here at Waverley Council as well. It's it's a way of sort of getting more Aboriginal involvement in the community, and for people to see. So, and we like to present it at a high level. So, we're not about pushing a mediocre. We want to do the best we can to get the best impact, and we're not from here. So but we do honour and pay our respects to the people, which is very important. So we don't try to encroach on their area of influence. So like down here in Bondi, it's the land of the Bidjigal people, the Bidjigal clan of the Darrell Nation, Burra Bidjigal, and so I always make sure I show the right thing and be respectful, and that way no one can come back and say, well, you're doing the wrong thing, because the last thing I want to do is the wrong thing by upsetting anybody, and because all Aboriginal people were in the same boat. So we have to learn to respect each other first and foremost, to get the job done that we need to get done, and that is to educate, our fellow Australians and people from overseas, about how beautiful and intriguing the Dreamtime is, and how much relevance it has on each person in the world, whether they know it or not, yeah.
What do you see your future as now?
I still see myself as a teacher. I always will. There's so much more to learn, so much more to tell, and I think that teaching is a great, honourable profession, and I think people need to start behaving in an honourable fashion, with true integrity and not falsehoods and stuff like that. So, and we've got to be wary, but I think true people who have honour should stand up and should be honourable, not, not sit on the fence. A true warrior will stand up and be on the right side, and that's how I see myself, to stand up for the right things in life.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.